The rain hadn't let up in hours. Thick streaks of it raced down the tall hospital windows like tears that refused to stop falling. Inside the waiting room, under the sterile hum of fluorescent lights, Eli Morgan sat with a paper cup of lukewarm coffee cradled between his hands. His coat was still damp. He hadn't even bothered to shake it off. He wasn't there for anyone in particular, not today. Across the room, a boy, 16, maybe 17, sat hunched in a chair with his hood pulled up and his fists clenched. His shoes were soaked. His knee bounced. His eyes were red, but he wasn't crying anymore. He had that far-off stare Eli knew too well. The kind that saw nothing but dark tunnels ahead. Eli glanced down at the cup in his hands. Then back at the boy. "You waiting for someone?" he asked gently, not expecting a reply. The boy didn't look at him. But after a long silence, he mumbled, "My brother." He OD'd. Eli nodded slowly. "Is he okay?" A long pause. Then, "They don't know." He stopped breathing for, too long. Eli shifted in his seat and let the silence hang. He knew not to rush it. "Want some coffee?" he offered, holding out his cup. The boy glanced at it, then shook his head. Eli leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his voice quiet. "You don't know it yet," he said, "but this pain, it won't define you." The boy turned to him for the first time. His face was pale, mouth drawn tight. "How would you know?" Eli met his eyes. His voice didn't waver. "Because I've been where you are." Not the exact place, but close enough to recognize the weight. Another pause. "People always say stuff," the boy said. "They don't mean it. Or they just don't get it." "Maybe," Eli said. "But one night, a stranger said something to me. And it saved my life." The boy blinked at him. The knee stopped bouncing. Eli offered a faint smile. "And now, I try to pass that forward. One person at a time." The intercom crackled overhead, announcing a code blue in a different wing. The boy winced. Eli sat back and let the moment breathe. Outside, the rain slowed to a mist. 15 years earlier. Winter had come early to St. Louis that year, sharp winds slicing down alleys, frost crawling up windshields before dusk even settled. Eli Morgan was 24 and felt 100 years old. He sat on the edge of a motel bed that smelled faintly of bleach and cigarette ash, staring at a half-eaten vending machine sandwich on the nightstand. The room was dim except for the flickering television, playing some late-night infomercial selling kitchen knives that never dulled. Eli's own edges had dulled months ago. He'd lost his job at the auto shop in October. Couldn't pay rent by November. His girlfriend, Jess, had tried to stick it out. God bless her, but she left when he started drinking at breakfast and stopped answering the phone. She said she didn't recognize him anymore. He didn't blame her. The worst part, he didn't recognize himself either. Eli rubbed his temples. His duffel bag lay open on the floor, nearly empty. Just some clothes, an envelope with his last $42, and a folded photo of his mother, worn thin at the corners. She'd passed 5 years ago. Cancer. The only parent he ever knew. His father had bailed before he was born. He was alone. And he was tired. So damn tired. He stood up, the springs creaking beneath him, and grabbed his coat. He didn't know where he was going, just knew he couldn't sit in that room another minute. He walked aimlessly for blocks, hands shoved deep in his pockets, jaw tight. The cold cut through the seams of his jacket. On the corner of Jefferson and 8th, a small diner blinked in the dark. Lindy's, the sign read in tired neon. Something about the warm glow beckoned. He hadn't eaten anything real in a day and a half. The bell above the door jingled as he entered. The place smelled like bacon grease and coffee. A few truckers sat at the counter. A waitress wiped down a booth with the kind of tired efficiency that said she'd seen it all. Eli slid into a corner seat. After a few minutes, she approached. "Coffee?" "Yeah," he mumbled. "Please." She poured it, no questions. He wrapped his hands around the warm mug like it might hold him together. Then a voice came from the next booth over. "Cold night," it said. Gravelly but gentle. You look like someone who's had better ones. Eli glanced sideways. An older man sat alone, a leather-bound book beside his plate of eggs. He wore a navy wool coat and had kind eyes, weathered, but not hardened. Something like that, Eli replied. The man nodded, like that was answer enough. Name's Cal, he said, extending a hand. You don't have to shake it if you're not in the mood. Eli hesitated. Then shook it. Eli. You from around here? Used to be, Eli muttered. Cal took a bite of his toast, chewed slowly. Looks like you're carrying something heavy. Eli let out a bitter laugh. That obvious? Cal smiled. To someone who's carried his own load, sure. Eli stared at his coffee. He didn't plan to talk. But something about the man, his stillness, maybe, made silence feel safe. I lost my job. Lost my place. My girl's gone. Haven't spoken to my dad in years. Not even sure he knows I'm alive. And honestly. He laughed again, hollow this time. Not sure I want to be. Cal didn't flinch. He set his fork down and folded his hands. I almost didn't make it through my 20s, he said after a beat. Came back from overseas and couldn't find my way. Nightmares. Rage. Couldn't hold a job. Thought about ending it more times than I can count. Eli blinked. What stopped you? Cal leaned back. One night, I was sitting on the edge of a bridge. Whole life weighing down on me. And a jogger, this guy I'd never seen before, slowed down, stopped, and just sat beside me. Did he talk you down? Nope, Cal said. Didn't say a word. Just sat there. For 20 minutes. No judgment. No advice. Just presence. Eli frowned. That's it. That's it, Cal said softly. But that night, it was enough. It reminded me that I wasn't invisible. That maybe, just maybe, there was still a part of the world that gave a damn. Eli didn't speak. His throat was tight. Cal reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small folded slip of paper. He slid it across the table toward Eli. Eli looked at it, wary. Then opened it. You're not done yet. You matter, even if you can't see it now. Keep going. Eli swallowed hard. What is this? It's something I've carried with me, Cal said. And now, I think it's yours. Eli felt a pressure behind his eyes he hadn't allowed in weeks. Maybe months. I don't even know you, he whispered. You don't have to, Cal said with a warm smile. Kindness doesn't require a biography. Just a heartbeat. The waitress came back, refilling Eli's coffee. Cal slid his bill onto the table and stood. Take care of yourself, Eli, he said, buttoning his coat. And remember, one day, someone else will need those words. When the time's right, you'll know. He walked out into the cold. Eli sat frozen for a long while, staring at the slip of paper, the coffee cooling between his hands. It wasn't some miracle cure. But it was the first time in months he didn't feel entirely alone. The wind outside howled as Eli stepped back into the motel room, clutching the slip of paper like it might crumble if he breathed wrong. The note burned in his hand, not with heat, but with weight. It felt too good for him. Too kind. Too human. He dropped it on the nightstand beside the uneaten sandwich and sat on the edge of the bed, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. The coffee still sloshed in his stomach, warm and bitter, but it couldn't quiet the storm inside. He'd heard words before. From counselors, well-meaning friends, even Jess when she'd still believed in him. But none of them had landed like this. None of them had come from someone who looked him in the eye and saw the pain without flinching. He looked up at the TV, which now showed an old sitcom rerun, people laughing, hugging, moving through a life that looked impossibly light. He turned it off. The room fell silent. In the quiet, the ache crept back in. He looked at the duffel bag again. Its open mouth seemed to beckon him toward an ending. Toward stillness. Toward relief. Eli stood and walked to the bathroom. He opened the medicine cabinet. A bottle of sleeping pills sat behind a half-used tube of toothpaste. He'd bought them earlier that month, telling himself they were just in case his insomnia got worse. But deep down, he'd known. He held the bottle in his hand and stared at it. Then, suddenly, his eyes flicked back to the door. The diner. The note. He stormed out of the bathroom, grabbed the slip of paper from the nightstand, and unfolded it again, his hands shaking. You're not done yet. You matter, even if you can't see it now. Keep going. His throat tightened. He read it again. Then again. As if repetition might make it true. Tears welled in his eyes before he could stop them. He sat down hard on the bed, burying his face in his hands. A choked sob escaped. Then another. This wasn't supposed to happen. He was supposed to be past the point of caring. Of feeling. But damn it, Cal had seen him. Had looked into the mess and still offered something. Not a solution. Not a sermon. Just belief. And belief, Eli realized, could be a lifeline. He didn't sleep much that night, but he didn't take the pills. He tucked them back into the cabinet and shut the door on them like he was closing a chapter. The days that followed weren't easy. He called a local shelter and got a bed, temporary, but safer than the motel. They connected him with a counselor named Daryl who ran a weekly group for men recovering from trauma, addiction, and isolation. Eli didn't want to go at first, but he showed up anyway. The first few weeks, he didn't say much. Just listened. But one night, a man across the circle spoke about standing on a bridge the week before, thinking no one would notice if he disappeared. His voice cracked. He said the scariest part wasn't wanting to die, it was believing he'd never truly lived. Eli reached into his wallet and felt the paper, still folded, still crisp. He didn't speak that night either. But something stirred in him. Months passed. Then a year. Eli got a job changing oil at a service station downtown. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. He stayed sober. Went to group every Thursday. Eventually, he began to speak up. Share his story. He kept Cal's note close. Tucked in the sleeve of his wallet. Read it on the hard days. Memorized it for the days he couldn't bear to look at it. And then came the night that changed everything. It had been a brutal winter day. Snow piled against curbs, traffic crawling, heaters hissing in every room. After work, Eli stopped by the grocery store and saw a teenage boy sitting outside near the carts, no coat, eyes glassy. Eli hesitated. Walked past him. Got inside. Filled a basket. But he couldn't shake the image. On the way out, he stopped and knelt in front of the boy. You okay, kid? The boy looked startled. Shrugged. Waiting on my mom, he said. She's in there. But something about the way he said it rang hollow. You sure you're warm enough? The boy didn't answer. Eli reached into his coat, pulled out a folded piece of paper. Not the note, he'd never part with that. But a copy he'd written the night before, just in case. He handed it to the boy. I don't know what you're dealing with. But I want you to know something. The boy took the paper, confused. You're not done yet, Eli said. You matter, even if you can't see it now. Keep going. The boy blinked. Why are you? Eli smiled. Someone once said it to me. Saved my life. He walked away before the tears in his eyes betrayed him. From that day on, Eli made it a quiet mission. One note, once a month. Sometimes he handed it to someone he saw sitting alone. Sometimes he left it tucked in a library book or pinned to a community board. A tiny message in a bottle. Each note, a seed of the kindness that once saved him. Not every note made a difference. He'd never know, really. But that wasn't the point. He just knew what it had done for him. And that was enough. 3 years later, Eli stood in the waiting room of St. Augustine's General Hospital, his heart pacing faster than his feet ever could. His friend Jordan had called. His son, Jaden, had been admitted after an overdose. A 15-year-old boy with too much pain and too few words. Eli had met Jaden a year ago at a youth mentoring event, a scrawny, sarcastic teen with eyes far older than his age. They bonded over a broken vending machine and a shared hatred of small talk. Since then, Eli had checked in with him weekly, texts, coffee, walks through the park. Nothing dramatic. Just presence. Now, Jaden was somewhere behind sterile white doors, unconscious but stable. Jordan paced the tile like a man fraying at the edges. Eli sat with him, silent. When Jordan finally crumpled into the chair beside him, Eli placed a hand on his shoulder. Whatever he's facing, Eli said gently, he's not facing it alone. Jordan nodded, eyes red. It was something Eli had promised himself he'd be, present. The way Cal had been for him. When Jaden woke 2 days later, Eli was there. No speeches, no lectures. Just a folded piece of paper waiting on the bedside table. Jaden read it silently, his fingers trembling. You're not done yet. You matter, even if you can't see it now. Keep going. He didn't speak right away. But a tear rolled down his cheek. And when he finally looked up at Eli, his voice cracked. You gave this to me once before, he whispered. I found it in my notebook. Thought it was stupid. Eli nodded, smiling softly. Still might be. But sometimes stupid things save us. Jaden smiled through the tears. Thanks for being here. Eli leaned back in the chair, his heart both heavy and full. Always. Months passed. Jaden started therapy. He wrote songs now, rough, raw ones with words he never used out loud. He'd perform them at open mic nights, always wearing the same black hoodie, the folded note tucked in the pocket. Other boys joined Eli's circle, kids from broken homes, kids who'd slipped through cracks. Some needed advice. Others just needed someone to sit beside them in the quiet. Eli never pushed. He just showed up. Sometimes that was enough. Sometimes, it was everything. One rainy Saturday, Eli sat in Lindy's diner, the same booth where he'd first met Cal. He still came here once a month, as if the walls remembered him. As if they could bless the next lost soul who walked through the door. This time, Cal was already there. He looked older, thinner, paler. His hands trembled slightly as he stirred his tea. Eli slid into the seat across from him. I wasn't sure you'd be here, Eli said. Cal smiled. Didn't think I'd get another chance. Eli paused. Something in his voice was different. Softer. Final. I saw Jaden, Eli said, voice low. He's okay now. Still healing. But your words, they reached him. Cal nodded slowly, as if that had been his hope all along. I've seen more sunrises than I expected, he said. But I think I'm rounding the bend. Eli felt his chest tighten. You scared? Cal chuckled. No, not anymore. I've lived enough. But I did want to see you again. To say, thank you. Eli blinked. Me. You kept the words alive, Cal said. Passed them forward. That's more than most ever do. Eli didn't know what to say. So he reached into his pocket and pulled out a fresh slip of paper, one he'd written that morning. He handed it to Cal, who unfolded it slowly. The same words. The same ink. Cal smiled. And then he reached into his own coat, pulled out a faded envelope. I wrote this the day I met you, he said. In case you ever needed to remember how far you've come. Eli opened the envelope and found a letter, handwritten. Dear Eli. If you're reading this, you've kept going. That alone is everything. You don't owe the world greatness. You owe it your heart. Be kind. Stay soft. And never underestimate the power of showing up. You mattered then. You matter now. Keep going. Cal. Tears blurred Eli's vision. Thank you, he whispered. Cal reached across the table and squeezed his hand. You're the kind of man this world desperately needs. A week later, Cal passed away peacefully in his sleep. Eli sat in the back pew at the memorial, listening to stories from other lives Cal had touched. Waitresses, students, war buddies, a janitor from the library who'd once received a note in his lunch bag. He wasn't alone in being saved. And that comforted him more than anything. The January wind carried a sharpness that cut straight through Eli's coat as he stepped off the bus and onto the slushy sidewalk. The sun had already begun to sink, casting a pale orange hue across the buildings. Downtown was quieter than usual, just a few people moving with purpose, heads down, collars up. Eli turned the corner toward Lindy's diner, hands shoved in his pockets. He wasn't hungry. Not for food. But today was the anniversary, 4 years since the night he'd nearly disappeared and been caught, gently, by the smallest net, words on a napkin from a stranger who noticed. He'd paused across the street from the diner. That's when he saw her. A woman sat on the curb, knees tucked to her chest, dark hair matted with melting snow. Her face was flushed with cold, but it was her eyes, red, blank, exhausted, that drew Eli like a magnet. She reminded him of someone. Of himself. He crossed without thinking. Hey, he said, soft and steady. You okay? She didn't look up. I'm fine. He crouched beside her, ignoring the wet seeping into his jeans. I've sat there before, he said. Same curb. Thought I'd disappear and no one would notice. Her eyes flicked toward him. Suspicious. Curious. Guarded. I'm not trying to fix anything, he said. Just, here. He pulled out his wallet. Slid out a worn, folded piece of paper. The ink had faded from years of pocketing, but the words still rang clear. He hesitated. This one was special. The one Cal had written. The one he swore he'd never part with. But something told him, it was time. He handed it to her. She stared at it, then slowly unfolded it. Her lips moved silently as she read. You're not done yet. You matter, even if you can't see it now. Keep going. She stared at it for a long moment. Her lips quivered. Eli sat quietly, letting the silence be sacred. Finally, she whispered, Why would you give this to me? He smiled gently. Because someone once gave it to me when I needed it most. And it saved my life. Tears slid down her cheeks. Eli stood slowly and offered a hand. I was going to get some coffee, he said. You don't have to come. But it's warm. And I've got time. She hesitated. Then reached out. Inside Lindy's, the lights were warm and golden. The same waitress, now older, smiled when she saw Eli. She brought them coffee, no questions asked. The woman, her name was Sarah, wrapped her hands around the cup and stared into the steam like it held something sacred. They didn't talk much. Just enough. She was going through a divorce. Lost her job last month. Her mother had passed 2 weeks ago. And the silence in her apartment had grown so loud she couldn't bear it tonight. Eli nodded. He knew that silence. They sipped coffee. She cried once. He didn't interrupt. Before they left, he handed her his number. Not pressure, just presence. Just the offer. As they walked outside, snow began to fall. Soft. Gentle. Sarah turned to him. Thank you. For not walking past me. Eli shrugged. Cal didn't walk past me either. Feels like the least I can do. She smiled, eyes still heavy but no longer hollow. Maybe I'll pass it on one day too. Eli looked up at the sky and felt the sting of tears press at his eyes. Yeah, maybe that's how we heal. That night, he returned home, pulled out a fresh sheet of paper, and wrote the words again, deliberate, slow, sacred. You're not done yet. You matter, even if you can't see it now. Keep going. He folded it, slid it into his coat pocket. Because someone, somewhere, would need it next. Epilogue. Years later, after Eli passed, peacefully, quietly, with Jaden at his side, a stack of worn notes was found in his drawer. Dozens of them. All the same words. Some with water stains. Others with fingerprints. One with a child's drawing on the back. At his memorial, Jaden stood before a small, crowded room. His voice trembled. Eli wasn't famous. He didn't have awards or titles. But he saw people. And more than that, he reminded us that we mattered. He was the reason I'm standing here at all. He held up the old napkin. This saved me. Just 12 words. 12 words that rippled through dozens of lives. Maybe hundreds. Maybe more. He looked at the room. If you ever feel like you're done, like no one sees you, remember this, you're not done yet. You matter. Keep going. He stepped down from the podium, folded the napkin with care, and slid it into his pocket. Because the world still needed it. And he would be the one to carry it forward.